this spring, but we were much too late, and it was not the right time of year to be coming in with seed with a hot summer in front of us anyway. This is described by our contractor, Mr. Bland, that y'all met last month, as a basically 3-year project, maybe 4, to really get a luxuriant, thick lawn in there. He believes it can be done, and as we've been told that by other people too, although less enthusiastically than he, we believe it as well. What this proposal calls would require closing the park, the grassy areas at John Howell, which are really the ellipse, what we're calling the ellipse up by Barnett, the big grassy lawn that we're, the huge one right beside it. And then in the lower area, there's a two smaller areas of grassy area beside the playground that are included in this. It will include another aeration, fertilization, liming. In the interim, there'll be another removal of weeds, and then several hundred pounds, many hundred pounds of ryegrass to go in the fall. In order to close the park, we need the park to not permit events in there. They have agreed not to permit events in there from September 17th or 18th through the end of the first week in November. They've also notified the Mayor's Office of Special Events not to permit events in there. It's a challenge. It'll be a challenge in that we have not contemplated blocking it off with hurricane fence. We plan to put up symbolic barriers and lots of signage, and then try to educate the hell out of people about what's going on. The contractor understands that that's the level that we're talking about, and he thinks that it will, under normal conditions, live through that. We can achieve substantial compliance, no big events. It will withstand dogs running on it, occasional violations, occasional challenges. The other consideration that I think we've considered in this is that the long-range proposals that we hope to meet with grants, if we can get the general plan, the plan that we publicized and are going to do the walkthroughs about, agreed upon, will involve some work around the perimeter of the lawn. There are erosion issues around the edge, particularly up where this unbricked sidewalk goes, and there's a proposal to finish bricking the sidewalk and to sell bricks again for a year or more until we begin that process, which will be a fundraiser. So that will be some activity near the newly grassed area, but the newly grassed area will be slightly smaller than the grassy area that you see now. It will be outside the drip lines, which is just the way things are. The canopy is slowly filling in, and from the perimeter as it will. It's got many years to go because it's not going to fill in with that gap, but it is expanding. And we're confident, and the contractor is confident, that any marginal damage that occurs around the edges during such contracting can be dealt with without too many problems. It also contemplates, so we all understand, that we'll be coming back every single year for maintenance funds to do this. If we want that to be a grassy, those areas to be substantially grassy, then we're going to have to come back and periodically fertilize, fill in seed, treat leaves, weed invasions, even if we get them substantially removed. The contractor estimates 1,500-ish a year to accomplish that, 1,500 a year to accomplish that and keep it going. Now here's our choices. We contemplated doing it in 2 pieces, but it really doesn't achieve much economy of scale. And the biggest ones are the top ones, and we've got the permission to do it. So that's a reason to do it now, in our view. It's a reason to do it now because the momentum is in place, because we've begun the process, which is a several-year process of improving the conditions there that have not been touched for many years. And it doesn't really make sense in our view to postpone the lower ones because they're not a big portion of it, and are really, that's just not the most important part of this. And the cost savings are not doing those are not very great. But we think it's worth doing now because it is a several-year process. To not do it now, if we decide not to fund this now, it'll be a 1-year postponement, effectively. We don't want to try to put a massive grass lawn in the fall. It doesn't make, in the spring. or summer, when you've got a hot summer, like right behind you, want to do it. This grass will not go completely dormant except in very cold weather, and then it will have to grow, slow growth moments during the winter in warmer spells, and then when the spring kicks in, it'll kick right back in, and we ought to get it in good shape to be able to withstand the summer. The price includes all watering, and we made a deliberate decision not to try to spend any money on further irrigation equipment because it is not, in our view, proved to be a wise expenditure. It is not. It has been dysfunctional and expensive and deteriorated. In fact, we investigated initially in some of our first investigations trying to repair it, and the consensus unanimously was, don't worry about it. If you want irrigation, just put a whole new system in. It's cheaper to do that than it is to chase around underground trying to figure out inch by inch what works, especially when it hadn't been used for some years. But even if it had been used, that might have been the case. In any case, that is the case. So that's our motion. We are aware that it's a chunk, and we think it's, on the whole, a wise investment. And it's going to require effort from the Parks Committee and from the citizens, the many that we've been trying to engage to keep eyes on it, and we're pretty pleased with that. I think that part of it, which Lauren has had a huge amount to do with, assembling a ton of people who are enthusiasts for the park and identifying them. There are many of them out there. Has been a very rewarding part of this. So that is my motion. Sir.
I think the work that you're doing on this is wonderful, and that lengthy report that you had up for us to read was quite comprehensive. And I've only heard, and I'm certainly in favor of all this, having been involved with the park many, many years ago. But I thought I heard you say you were going to plant rye grass.
Excuse me, I apologize. It will be fescue. I apologize. My apologies.
Okay.
I misspoke.
All right. That's it.
Sir.
I'm going to, once again, you and I talked about this.
We did.
I very strongly feel that if we're going to put the money out there, that we need to have not a hurricane fence, but a full-sided fence, something other than a crime scene do not cross type thing. Because we can hope that people will cooperate, they won't. And I would hate to see that we put the money out, and at the very least, we should make enough money available to make a quick purchase. If within a short time, we find out that, wow, people don't stay off this when we have this sign asking them to. We have a, as you know, that pathway going down between the upper park and lower park.
Right.
And I feel very strongly that we should go ahead and just plan on doing it, if not including the money it would cost and have it available to move quickly. Otherwise, we've wasted a year and a lot of money.
Good point, Fraser.
I guess just on top of adding to that, you guys talked to Piedmont Park in terms of how they sort of handle, because they rope off the section and they might have some good insights into how to best
We didn't
move
know
people off.
Piedmont Park, but we talked to the guys from parks, the city parks came and looked at it, and they actually recommended to do what Piedmont had done, which I think was putting stakes and then road, but
It's
it's
a
not
symbolic
as,
barrier.
right, it's not
more
as
than,
Yeah.
much of a fence
Looks
as
nicer.
what Fraser was talking about.
I will agree that aesthetics is certainly one of the things that we reacted to it. The thought it would look more or less. It doesn't have to look horrendous. It doesn't have to be bright orange. If we follow Fraser's thought, it would look. It could be dark green or black, as the sort used, in fact, as was used at Summerfest. And in fact, if we were going to do that, the first stop would be the warehouse to get out the leftover stuff from Summerfest that was wrapped up and put back in there. We would use that first. I don't necessarily object. I do want to mention to the board just what Lauren said, that we didn't have a definitive discussion of what they would, if they would have an objection. I don't think they would if we really argued along the lines that everyone is arguing, that it's our $3,500, and it'll be our labor and money on top of it afterwards. I do want to point out that it does look funky. It doesn't have to be right around the edge of the sidewalk, but it is a certainly greater look. I'm not opposed to it. I certainly understand the advantages of it.
Yeah, it would only go across the park right on the plant.
Yes, sir.
Still needs a lot of open.
There would be some open space under the trees and under the drip lines, which will not be planted. That's correct. Rob, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had two other questions. So, I mean, just in terms of a general budget question, and I know that Walter did some of the earlier work, in terms of these other large chunks that are happening as time goes on, are they being bid out? I mean, does it make sense to do that? Or are we just trusting that he's going to be the lowest person, or people ask us questions?
If they ask us questions, you can send them to me, and my answer will be that no, I don't know if he's absolutely the lowest person or not, nor are we obligated in any way to take the lowest person. We're going to, in my opinion, money, the biggest waste of all would be to spend 2/3 of that amount or $300 less than that amount on someone that we do not have confidence in, and discover, in this case, that that lack of confidence is justified. We're using it in this case because his performance to date has been extremely good, very reliable, very citizen-oriented. I have not shared, Lauren and I have not shared with the board some of the many things that he's done, not because we're just from a time point of view, but of the many things that he has done around the edges to help make our considerable presence in the park recently more acceptable, and more harmonious and less friction-oriented event for adjacent citizens. So I think we have confidence in him, and I think that's worth any amount of fees. And he was generally, that confidence was one of the reasons we selected him in the first place. It was not that he was absolutely the cheapest, although comprehensively I thought he was, but because he overall made the best impression on a variety of criteria: competence, price, experience, and plausibility. And I'd be happy to go over that. I think Lauren and I would be glad to go over that in some detail with him based on his professional reputation and our results. Yes, ma'am.
This is a question, I guess, for Rob. The money that came from the in-town raise, do we know what the figure is now that was raised, and how is that planned to be used for that part? Because it was my understanding that with all that money would go for the John Humble Park.
My plan was to use an initial chunk actually to buy some picnic benches for the park that I've been pricing out. I don't have everything fleshed out yet in terms of the amount of, actually I have a couple quotes from Victor Stanley, but I haven't had a chance to put all that together with New Baby and everything else. So that,
And are you going to do that again next year?
the raise will be happening again next year. The proceeds, I think, are going to be split between a couple different charities, though, next year. John Howell and a couple of other ones, but that's a topic for some other time, I think.
I have two comments, 1 minute if you will, John, and we'll come right to you about that. Pam asked me to bring that point up, and I would appreciate it if you could give us a date definite as a report to that. We publicized that race. We didn't sponsor it, but we publicized it.
Well, there's a lot to be said for how that whole thing was handled, so and I can go into that in detail if you like.
I'm not finished, but I'll be glad to listen to you at length when I am. We did publicize it. Before and after, we were
Yeah, and there were accusations that my sponsors were on the VHCA website, which I did not appreciate, which was not told to me until Brian Gross told me, and no one told me that. So if you want to talk about that later,
No, I'm not talking about it now.
And I'm
Here's what I'm
very
trying to
sleep deprived right now, so you can just wait till I finish it, all right?
No, sir. I'm going to answer the point, and you can react as you choose, and I'll be glad to give you the point. The point is that I sat silent, and this entire board sat silently while you mocked our association. I'll be glad to give you an exact quote of what you said, our procedures and our
And
conversation.
nobody from Parks at the event. no one from VHCL at the event. So again, I don't want to go into all this right now, and if you want to make this an issue right now, when I've been getting two hours of sleep per night for the past week, I'm happy to, but I don't think it's really appropriate right now.
No, I would
And I've been trying to be supportive of parks. I asked for quotes from the initial work. I still have yet to see the original quote from Walter Bland, which was in February. You have not sent it to me. So I have a real problem with that in terms of trying to work with parks and not getting information from you all. I got the last quote, the last board meeting, 4 months later. So if you want to talk about timeliness, why don't you respond to that?
So I would like to know very much when we can
I
expect
emailed
that
Pamela and I said by August I would have it finished.
Thank you, that
All right.
answer alone will do it.
And I'd appreciate to get Walter Bland's quote, which I've been asking for 4 months. Which
Secondly,
you said you'd get it to me after the February meeting.
and I'll just point out that one of the things that would have happened in this cumbersome organization, sir, is that that Pam and this cumbersome organization and other committees have managed to assemble reports on much more difficult and complicated issues much more quickly. So we'd be glad to help, but it is worth noting that we referred volunteers to that group. I personally referred Ms. Curry's grandson to that event as a volunteer. So we'll...
Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Go
Now, I
run
want-
over that again.
I'm sorry? So, you're welcome to deal with it if you'd like to say
Well, and
anything.
I'd be overjoyed to see that original quote from Walter Bland, which you said you'd get to me after the February meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So on that note,
Lastly,
I mean, unbelievable. So, because my wife has been texting me, and I gotta get out of here. So, enjoy the rest of your meeting. I'm going again next year too, so.
John, do you have a question for us?
In defense of the orange snow fence around the park, the city used it downtown at Woodruff Park after our friends, the protesters, left. And I was downtown yesterday and saw the park, and that turf is magnificent. Of course, we taxpayers, pretty sum of money too, I'm sure.
It's 'cause of-
But I mean, but the fence really did keep people off and served its purpose. It's not the most aesthetic.
Well, there's other than orange, I mean, seriously.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Something
yeah.
else less.
Mhm.
I will leave it to obviously, I think we should, the price that we provided doesn't include that, but we can
Could we
Frame
table the
it
motion
as-
temporarily till we get the cost of what it would be the fence and
No,
include
sir.
that in?
Here's why I don't want to do that, and there's only one reason, and that's because we've asked parks to start shutting down events and issue permits in the park from September. So if we don't want to do it, I'm fine.
No, that's
I'm
not
going to
going to, no, Jack, listen. We can table it till we get the amount of money we need for the fence and include it. We're not going to put it off. It's still going to go forward in October. But do we have to vote right now? This is what I've got, 3,500, and we'll think about the fence later. Or can we just table it if we have
Do an up to and add, like, estimate the fence would
I
cost
would
more
much
than
prefer that.
300 or
If I knew, if we had any idea what.
Yeah, so we can,
Can't they be two separate items? I mean,
yeah.
the money for
Well, they
the
can
work
be.
that needs to be done, and then in the meantime, find out the fence
I would
cost.
be much
and make
happier
it
with that
separate.
motion if we want to do it that way. I do feel very odd because it was actually kind of a big deal to get the permission to get the park closed. I mean, we worked fairly hard on that. It was emails, but we also followed up with phone calls and let Alex's office know and tried to really communicate that because we were asking them. I think we were both still worried even after that there's going to be some permit issue inadvertently and we're going to wind up with some dang event trying to show up in the park that we're going to learn about at the NDU when it comes up for approval, which is how we found out about a lot of them. So what I don't want to do, here's my biggest fear, is that we put all this effort into working with parks on this and then we wind up telling them for any reason at the end that, oops, we're not going to do it. We'll never get the park. I think it'll be very hard to get the permission.
I take your point, but I hardly see, I mean,
Can we
and
do
I
it?
will,
Can you
and I will
withdraw
withdraw
that way?
but I will withdraw the motion, but I would say that Nothing I have said about tabling it and getting the price on the fence and including it in any way detracts from what we want to do, slows it down, or even hints at the idea that we're saying we're sorry, we're not going to do it. I'm saying, yes, we are going to do it, and I want to include the price. Now, if the board doesn't want to do it that way, fine. But let's not escalate it to a level that doesn't require by what I said or what I asked.
I have a question or suggestion.
Go ahead.
I think it's similar to what someone else said, but I think couldn't we approve the motion for the $3,500 and make a condition upon whether it's an email vote approval of the quote for the hurricane fencing or whatever you call that, so that we can get the $3,500 in motion and then find out this other price. And if we can vote for it by email before the next meeting, then that makes
We can do an
everything.
email vote too, once we know what the cost is.
Right.
It's just-
But the $3,500 doesn't go forward until we vote on the next, whatever that quote is. But we approve it with it going forward once we approve the hurricane fencing.
There's just two things I want to touch on here. One is, Lauren and I are not sure, because we did discuss this earlier, 100% sure that Parks is going to approve putting the fence up for 6 weeks around the entire piece of it. We're not sure. It might not be necessary to put it up 6 weeks around it. It might be that the first 4 or 5 weeks really get it out of the ground and get it going, and then it could come down and be replaced by symbolic fencing. I would also appreciate some discretion about how this is done. The two areas that I think are going to be the most problematic are the ones on the upper level. It lives at the end, and the bigger piece. I would like the option of not doing it down by the playground. I think that would be really a useful option if we could try it. The fencing, it's not so much the fence, which is inexpensive, as it is the labor of setting the stake, pounding the stake in the ground every, whatever they did, John, 6 feet, I guess.